Imagine this. It is 52 BC. In the heart of what we now call France, around a hill named Alesia, there are two massive walls. Between these two walls, in a no-man's land, stand thousands of women, children, and elderly people. They are trembling, crying, and they haven't eaten anything for days. Inside the city behind them stands Gaul's great leader, Vercingetorix. He has expelled his own people because the food inside is only enough for the warriors. In front of them, behind the outer wall, stands the most ambitious man in history, Julius Caesar. Caesar does not allow these civilians to pass. He uses them as living obstacles. For weeks, these people died of starvation between the two walls, in full view of both sides, even resorting to cannibalism. Caesar watched them. Vercingetorix watched them. No one lifted a finger. This was not a war. This was a massive ritual of digging a collective grave, one that would determine the future of Europe. Today, I will tell you the dark story that textbooks never teach, the Siege of Alesia. We will see how the Romans turned into monsters and how a nation's hope for freedom was crushed beneath an engineering marvel. If you're ready, welcome to history's bloodiest chessboard.
Before we reach Alesia, we need to understand one thing. Caesar was in trouble. He had been burning and destroying Gaul for 8 years, but this time was different. He was no longer facing scattered tribes. He was facing Vercingetorix. This man was almost like Caesar's student. He had learned to think like a Roman. Against Caesar, he used a scorched earth strategy. The Roman army grew hungry, exhausted, and cornered. When Vercingetorix withdrew with 80,000 warriors into the natural fortress called Alesia, he believed he was luring Caesar into a trap. "Come, besiege me on this hill," he was saying. "I have a massive relief army outside. I will crush you between two fires." Caesar had two choices: retreat and end his career and likely his life, or attempt the impossible. Caesar chose the impossible, but his weapon was not the sword, it was the shovel. Roman legionaries were the best soldiers in the world, yes, but more than that, they were the best construction workers in the world. Caesar gave the order, surround the city. But they didn't just besiege it, they built an enormous wall, 18 kilometers long around Alesia, stakes, trenches, wolf pits. But there was a problem. Caesar knew Vercingetorix had sent word to his allies outside. Soon, a massive Gallic army, 250,000 strong, would arrive from behind. What would Caesar do now? This is where one of the craziest decisions in military history was made. Caesar ordered the construction of a second wall to protect his rear. The inner wall prevented the Gauls from breaking out. The outer wall was meant to stop the army coming from outside. Caesar and his army were now trapped like a sandwich between two walls. They would fight in both directions, inside the prison they had built themselves. This wasn't just courage, this was pure madness.
Now let's examine these walls in detail, because the real horror lies here. Caesar didn't simply stack stones. He built a death labyrinth that even modern armies would struggle to create. First, the legionaries constructed what they called cippi. These were massive tree trunks sharpened at the top and buried in the ground. A man running in the darkness would impale his chest on them. But that wasn't enough. Behind them, they dug pits called lilia, lilies. At the bottom of these pits were stakes hardened by fire, their tops sharpened. The pits were lightly covered with branches. The moment you stepped on one, your leg would be pierced and you would be left hanging there. And the worst of all, stimuli, hooked iron spikes buried in the ground. The more you struggled, the deeper they tore into your flesh. Roman soldiers worked 24 hours a day, one hand on the sword, the other on the shovel. Caesar personally inspected every line, telling his men, "If this wall is finished, the world will be ours." Inside the city, Vercingetorix was not idle. He watched from the ramparts as the Romans dug the earth like ants. Vercingetorix realized his food supplies were running out, and here the most horrifying decision was made. He expelled the civilians of the city, the Mandubi tribe, believing the Romans would either feed them or allow them to pass. But Caesar understood psychological warfare. If he fed them, his own army would starve. If he let them pass, the siege would be broken. As those innocent people died of hunger between the two walls, soldiers on both sides watched them while eating their meals. You will never see this part of history in movies, because this was the shared crime of both the hero Caesar and the patriot Vercingetorix, the moment when human life was reduced to zero in the face of military strategy.
And finally, that day arrived. On the horizon, a massive cloud of dust appeared. The relief army Vercingetorix had been waiting for had arrived. 250,000 men, 4 times the size of the Roman force. Inside the city, the Gauls manned the walls. Outside, the Gauls roared their war cries. Caesar's 50,000 men were now trapped between 2 colossal forces. This was the moment when the Roman Empire could have died before it was even born. The attack began at midnight. Imagine it. Pitch darkness, only torchlight, and the screams of tens of thousands of warriors from both sides. The Gauls raised ladders against the walls. The Romans could hear the screams of men falling into the traps described earlier. Caesar donned his famous red cloak. Do you know why? So his soldiers could see him from anywhere. He mounted his horse and rode from one end of the wall to the other, shouting, "We may die today, but if we die today, Rome will never be forgotten." The battle lasted 3 days. For 3 days, blood filled the trenches. The Gauls relied on their numbers. The Romans relied on discipline and their walls. Caesar held back his last reserve, the Germanic cavalry. At the most critical moment, the Gauls found a weak point in the outer wall. They were about to seize a hill. Caesar personally drew his sword and rushed to the spot with his last 4,000 men. He ordered the Germanic cavalry, "Go around and strike them from behind." Just as the Gauls thought victory was near, they saw Roman cavalry behind them. The army was so massive that panic spread like a virus. They began crushing each other. Discipline defeated chaos. The enormous relief army of 250,000 failed to breach Caesar's walls and collapsed in a single afternoon. For Vercingetorix, watching from the walls of Alesia, hope was gone. He watched his people flee. Caesar had won. But how? The next morning, a silence fell over Alesia. Only the groans of the wounded and the cries of crows could be heard. Vercingetorix put on his finest armor. He adorned his horse beautifully. The gates of the city opened. Caesar sat upon a platform, proud, exhausted, and merciless. Vercingetorix rode his horse in a circle around Caesar, then dismounted, removed his armor piece by piece, and laid it at Caesar's feet. He said not a single word. He knelt. This was Gaul kneeling. This was the beginning of the Europe we know today, being shaped by Roman culture. But the story doesn't end here. Did Caesar show respect to his great enemy? No. He chained Vercingetorix and sent him to Rome. For 6 years, he kept him in a dark, damp underground prison. Why? Just to parade him for a single day through the streets of Rome as a trophy. During Caesar's triumph, Vercingetorix was marched in chains before the people, and at the end of the ceremony, he was strangled, according to Roman tradition. Caesar, meanwhile, left Alesia like a god. No senator, no enemy could stand before him. With the gold and captives he gained at Alesia, he brought Rome itself. But the brutality of Alesia had killed something inside him. He was no longer just a general, he was a dictator. And the irony is this: Caesar, who destroyed his enemies behind walls at Alesia, would be stabbed 23 times by his own allies inside the Senate, where no wall could protect him. The blood he spilled at Alesia ultimately gave birth to the arrogance that led to his own end.
So what does the Siege of Alesia teach us? A victory won by military genius alone? No, it teaches us that ambition knows no limits. That day, Caesar didn't just win a battle, he destroyed a culture. If French is spoken today, if European law is built on Roman foundations, it is because of the thousands of innocent people who died between those two walls and Caesar's relentless shovels. History is not always fair. Sometimes the most brutal and the most disciplined prevail. Vercingetorix died as a hero, but Caesar remained as the man who changed the world. Yet both ultimately became victims of violence. If this story made you feel that history is more than dusty pages, that it is as real as a horror film, don't forget to hit the like button. Who is your favorite ancient general, Caesar or the man who stood against him, Vercingetorix? Let's discuss in the comments. We will continue to explore these forgotten stories together. See you in the next video in another dark corner of history. Take care.